The town of Akwu lay stretched beneath the vast African sky, where clay-walled homes with thatched roofs jostled for space beside towering glass buildings that reflected the burning sun. Smoke from cooking fires drifted lazily into the air, mingling with the shimmering reflection of the city's new skyline. Here, two worlds collided, the humble traditions of the ancestors and the glimmering promise of modern success. Children ran barefoot along the dusty paths while luxury cars crawled cautiously beside them, a stark reminder that progress often walked hand in hand with inequality. As evening fell, drums echoed across the village, announcing the twilight hour. The rhythm called people to the square, where elders sat beneath the ancient baobab tree. Stories were told in hushed voices, tales of ancestors who had walked these lands with courage and wisdom. Moonlight-illuminated faces lined with time, each wrinkle a lesson, each glance a reminder of the village's sacred truths. Marriage, they said, was not merely a union of hearts but a covenant before the ancestors themselves. A man and woman bound in love were also bound by duty, their bond watched over by spirits of forefathers and foremothers. From a distance, the elders' voices rose in solemn warning, "A tree that forgets its roots dries from the inside." It was a proverb carried on the winds, meant to caution those who sought to climb higher without honoring the soil from which they had grown. It foreshadowed the dangers of pride and neglect, the perils awaiting anyone who would abandon the lessons of their past in pursuit of fleeting glimmering fortunes. In a small, modest home near the edge of the village, a boy named Kofi crouched beside a flickering lamp, tracing letters in a worn notebook. His bare feet pressed into the cold earth floor, but his eyes shone with unyielding determination. "One day," he whispered to himself, "I will rise from this dust. One day, my name will echo beyond these walls." Poverty had been his cradle, struggle his teacher. Kofi learned early that survival demanded bold dreams and relentless effort. Night after night, he worked tirelessly, moving small bundles of goods for market stalls, counting coins that never seemed enough, and scribbling plans for a future the village elders could hardly imagine. Every setback became fuel, every failure a stepping stone. And standing quietly behind him, almost like a shadow of strength, was Amma. She had sold the last of her gold jewelry to support his ventures, cooked late into the night for the weary boy-turned-entrepreneur, and remained steadfast when debt collectors came knocking. Her sacrifices went unnoticed by many, yet they formed the bedrock upon which Kofi's dreams were built. Amma's presence was quiet but unshakable. Though her body was full, and society's whispers often cut like cold wind, she carried herself with the dignity of a queen who knew her worth. Her gentle hands folded and prepared the same meals for the workers who scorned her, her soft voice reminding Kofi of patience, loyalty, and honor. As Kofi's ventures slowly began to grow, a change crept into his eyes. The hunger for more wealth, more respect, more admiration, began to sparkle brighter than the simple joy of their small village victories. He would glance at the shiny new tools, the passing elite traders, and the towering glass buildings with a longing that sometimes eclipsed the love he felt for the woman who had built him from nothing. One evening, as Amma swept the floor, she paused and watched him staring out the window at the city lights. "Kofi," she said softly, "do not forget where we come from. Your eyes may wander to the stars, but remember, the roots must hold strong, or even the tallest tree will fall." Kofi nodded, though inside, the tension between ambition and loyalty had begun its quiet, restless murmur, a murmur that would grow louder with every shimmering success to come. The sun had barely dipped behind the glass towers when Kofi held the pen above the thick contract, feeling the weight of destiny in his hands. The $33 million international deal lay before him, a promise of grandeur that could lift him far above the dusty streets of his childhood. With a trembling breath he signed. In that moment, Kofi believed the ancestors had finally crowned him king, that his struggle and sweat had earned him a throne among the city's elite. That night, the city welcomed him with open arms. Crystal glasses clinked in sharp laughter, lights reflected in 1,000 mirrors, and the camera flashes flickered like lightning in a stormy sky. Wealth surrounded him, dazzling and intoxicating. Friends he had admired from afar now leaned in to congratulate him, their eyes sharp, their smiles polished. Kofi felt as if he had stepped into a world he had always been meant to enter, yet the brilliance began to blur the memories of the path that had brought him here. Among the glitter and silk, whispers floated in sharp tones, soft enough for no one but him to hear. "Does he really expect to parade her here?" one voice said. Another chuckled. "Perhaps it's time he found someone more fitting." The words pricked his heart. Amma, the woman who had sold her jewelry to keep his business alive, the woman who had stood silently through every debt collector and sleepless night, suddenly felt small, exposed under their judgment. Shame, subtle but fierce, began to crawl up Kofi's spine. Instead of gratitude, he felt a pang of embarrassment. He remembered Amma's sacrifices only in fleeting glimpses and found himself measuring love against the approval of strangers. Her gentle presence, once his source of pride, now seemed awkward beside the polished, city-bred elite. Kofi's mind wrestled silently, the devotion that had carried him from mud floors to marble halls, or the glittering approval of men whose warmth never extended beyond luxury and prestige. In the quiet of that night, even amid the laughter and music, a storm raged within him. Loyalty and pride battled silently, an invisible tempest. He knew the choice he faced could define not just his fortune but the soul of the man he had become. Weeks later, Kofi walked through the halls of his newly purchased city mansion, the ceilings soaring like ambitions that had outgrown their roots. Each polished floor reflected his image, yet it felt hollow beneath his feet. Consultants had advised him on every detail, his wardrobe, his speech, even the posture he wore like armor. The mirrors reminded him daily, perfection of appearance could mask everything else. The parties came next, glittering evenings where laughter echoed without heart, where loyalty was quietly mocked behind champagne glasses. Friends murmured, always gently, "You deserve a woman who matches your success. Amma, she's from the village, she does not belong here." The words, soft as silk but sharp as a thorn, planted seeds of doubt. Kofi began to question the very woman whose hands had carried him from poverty to promise. Amma wandered through the silent, grand halls alone. Each step felt small, swallowed by the vastness of a mansion built on her sacrifices. She paused by a plant in the yard, its leaves drooping under the unrelenting sun. Her hands, tender and steady, watered it with care, whispering softly, "Grow, even when the heart feels dry." The withering plant was a mirror of their marriage, struggling beneath the heat of ambition, yet waiting for attention, love, and nurture to bloom once more. She looked back at the shining mansion behind her and sighed. The walls glittered, the floors gleamed, but the warmth of a home, the laughter, the quiet love, the shared dreams, was absent. Kofi's eyes, once filled with gratitude, now wandered to new possibilities, forgetting the foundation upon which all his wealth had been built. And in that silence, the seeds of pride took root, ready to grow into storms that neither money nor glass walls could contain. The city's grand hall shimmered with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. Guests in designer suits and flowing gowns moved like waves, brushing past each other with laughter that sparkled but cut sharper than any knife. Kofi and Amma stepped inside, their presence a mix of pride and unease. Every eye seemed to measure, silently weighing worth, beauty, and status. The murmurs whispered in silk and gold, a language Kofi had longed to understand, but tonight it was a language meant to wound. Amma stood tall, her traditional cloth of deep indigo and embroidered gold flowing like river water around her. Among the glitter of foreign silk and sparkling jewels, she seemed both radiant and out of place, a bridge between worlds that no one fully understood. She smiled politely at acquaintances, her hands folded neatly, yet beneath her calm, Kofi could sense the tension, the quiet strength that had always held their home together. "Does he really walk around with her still?" a well-dressed associate murmured to another, barely hiding a laugh. "He needs an upgrade." The words landed in the air like stones. Amma's fingers tightened, a brief tremor of hurt crossing her face. Kofi felt a jolt in his chest, but instead of speaking, he laughed weakly, a thin, hollow sound. The laughter seemed to echo through the gilded room, louder than the music, louder than the drums that might have accompanied a village celebration. He had chosen acceptance among strangers over loyalty to the woman who had built him from the ground up. Amma's eyes met his for a fleeting second. In that look, she saw the shame he carried, the conflict he buried beneath ambition and desire for approval. It was a silent betrayal, louder than any spoken insult. Her heart, so steadfast for so many years, trembled in that instant, knowing the man who once protected and cherished her now faltered under the gaze of the city. That night, the walls of their mansion seemed taller, colder, and sharper. Words left unspoken filled the air with tension. Kofi paced the polished floors, wrestling with the pride that had carried him to fortune, while Amma sat in the quiet of the great hall, trying to anchor herself with memories of love that now felt threatened. When voices finally rose, they were not polite, They were edged with pain. "You do not understand," Kofi said, frustration cracking his voice. "You slow me down. You hold me back. I deserve better now." Amma rose slowly, her hands clasped before her, voice steady but strong. "Better?" she asked, her gaze piercing. "Do you forget the nights I spent selling my jewels to feed your workers? Do you forget the years I stood beside you when the world said you could not succeed?" Kofi shook his head, blinded by ego. "Times have changed. You belong to the village, not this world. I cannot carry both." The words hung in the air like a thundercloud. Amma's eyes glistened, not with fear, but with sorrow and dignity. She would not bend, would not kneel for a place she had earned through devotion. Without a word, she turned away, stepping lightly but firmly through the halls that once echoed with shared laughter. The journey back to her late father's humble home was quiet, yet full of weight. Dust rose beneath her sandals as she walked along the narrow paths of the village, each step a testament to self-respect. Pain sat heavily on her shoulders, but shame did not. She had chosen honor over comfort, loyalty over compromise. Village elders watched from their shaded porches and whispered among themselves. "Wealth without character is a tree that will not survive the storm," one elder murmured, shaking his head at Kofi's actions. Children listened, parents nodded, the story of pride and betrayal already becoming a lesson in the making. That evening, Kofi's mother confronted him, her voice soft but cutting. "Money without honor brings ruin," she said. "You have forgotten the roots that fed you, and the wind of arrogance now bends you toward destruction." Outside, clouds gathered and the wind began to howl. Thunder rumbled across the village, the first heavy drops of rain pounding the earth as if the ancestors themselves were speaking. Nature mourned the broken covenant between Kofi and Amma, warning him that riches alone could not shield a heart from consequence. Inside the mansion, Kofi sat alone, the echoes of laughter from the gala now a hollow memory. The city lights reflected off empty walls, a stark reminder that wealth without loyalty leaves a man exposed, vulnerable, and haunted. Amma's absence was felt like a shadow, the quiet dignity of her refusal reverberating through every polished floor and towering wall. Pride had claimed his tongue, but it could not erase the voice of conscience or the judgment of tradition. Outside, the storm spoke its relentless language, drumming against glass windows, bending trees, and whispering in the winds. Every action carries a weight, and every betrayal is remembered by the earth, by the ancestors, and by those who walk with honor in their hearts. The mansion, once a palace of triumph, now felt hollow. In the silence of the high ceilings, every echo of his footsteps reminded Kofi that fortune can turn on the smallest whim. Within days of Amma's departure, strange troubles arose. Suppliers delayed deliveries, unexpected fines arrived, and contracts that had seemed ironclad began to falter. The city's bright lights now flickered like warnings, each shimmer a reminder that his kingdom was fragile. Investors, once eager to toast his success, sensed weakness. Letters arrived, polite on the surface but sharp with doubt. "We must reconsider our position," one read. Another, "Stability is uncertain. We advise caution." The polished veneer of his success could no longer hide the cracks forming beneath. Kofi felt the first twinge of panic, a sensation foreign to a man who had once believed money could shield him from all storms. The $33 million deal, the promise he had celebrated as destiny, now teetered. Legal complications emerged. Clauses once ignored like whispers in the wind now threatened to undo the entire contract. Each lawyer's letter felt like a drumbeat of warning, echoing the old village proverb he had once scoffed at, "A tree that forgets its roots cannot stand in storm." Rumors began to swirl beyond the walls of his mansion. Social media buzzed with stories of his betrayal, mixing gossip with questions about his integrity. Friends who had laughed with him now whispered behind closed doors, their admiration replaced by cautious distance. Even the woman whose attention he had sought publicly turned away, sensing the shift in power. Pride, so long his armor, offered no protection against humiliation. Alone, Kofi walked through his vast halls. The chandeliers reflected his image, tall and imposing, yet the emptiness of the mansion pressed down on him heavier than any insult. Shadows of memory crept through the rooms. The nights Amma had stayed up tallying accounts, her hands worn but precise, tracking every coin to prevent disaster. She had caught every small error, every overlooked payment, every detail he now realized had kept ruin at bay. A single clause in the contract, missed in a moment of arrogance, now threatened to shatter everything. Stock prices fell like a dying baobab struck by a violent wind, investors panicked, and Kofi felt the weight of every decision he had ignored. Banks sent stern warnings, threatening to seize assets, including the mansion itself. Legal notices piled like rain-soaked leaves on his desk, each one heavier than the last. He recalled Amma's quiet diligence. Her careful hands had once steered the company through stormy markets, yet he had dismissed her counsel as unnecessary. Pride had blinded him, ambition had silenced him, and now that same pride was a chain wrapped tightly around his chest. Every failed transaction, every delayed payment, felt like the ancestors themselves knocking on his door, a reminder that wealth without respect, without humility, was hollow. Kofi sank into a leather chair, the city lights cutting through the high windows like blades. For the first time, regret whispered its truth into his heart. The sacrifices he had scorned, the loyalty he had belittled, now haunted his nights. Money could not fix what pride had broken, and the weight of his folly pressed down like the storms that rumbled in the distant hills. He muttered to himself, voice trembling, "Amma, I was blind. I have been blind to everything that truly matters." The echoes of his confession faded into the empty halls. Outside, the wind carried the first drops of a sudden rain, drumming against glass and roof tiles as if the ancestors themselves were speaking, reminding him, "A man who ignores loyalty and wisdom will find no shelter in even the tallest mansion." The city that once cheered Kofi now whispered behind his back. Former supporters, the very people who had clinked glasses to his success, now pointed and laughed, turning past praise into sharp-edged ridicule. "So this is the man who built a kingdom?" one asked under a breath. "A king of nothing but papers and pride." The words spread, like sparks in dry grass, igniting mockery that he could neither control nor extinguish. Newspapers and online tabloids seized the story, each headline a dagger. "The man who forsook loyalty for status," screamed one. Another, "From village roots to city shame, Kofi's betrayal of love." The city and village alike buzzed with gossip, and Kofi's name became a cautionary tale whispered in markets, offices, and homes. Each article reflected a truth he could no longer ignore. Wealth could not shield a man from the weight of his own decisions. The elders who had once blessed his wedding now turned away. Their silence was heavier than any scolding. When Kofi approached the village square, they lowered their eyes, murmured prayers for wisdom, but would not greet him. Their quiet condemnation struck deeper than words could. "A tree that forgets its roots withers," an elder said to a group of children nearby, using Kofi as a living example of pride undone. Parents nodded, pointing subtly at him, teaching their young ones that arrogance carries a price heavier than gold. Back in his mansion, the emptiness pressed on him. Electricity cut due to unpaid bills, rooms once alive with laughter and music now lay dark, the opulence of glass and marble meaningless in the shadows. He wandered through halls where portraits of past victories stared like silent judges. The echo of those grand parties had faded, the champagne, the applause, the clinking glasses, they existed only in memory. And in that silence, the loudest sound was the reminder of Amma. He remembered her hands, worn from cooking, selling her jewelry to keep the company afloat, praying at night for their success. Memories of her sacrifice haunted him more than the flashing cameras that had once celebrated him. He realized too late that it was not gold or contracts that had made him great. It had been love, loyalty, and patience, quietly given, endlessly devoted. Shame became unbearable. Kofi knew he must return to the village, to the place where roots ran deep, and where judgment was tempered with the hope of redemption. Walking along familiar streets, whispers followed him. People remembered his arrogance, the betrayal, but they also remembered who he had once been. The streets were lined with shadows and light, a place where truth could not be hidden. He found Amma in the courtyard of her late father's modest house. She was helping a group of young women measure cloth and calculate profits, her hand steady, her voice calm but firm. Her eyes, clear and determined, held a light no wealth or power could diminish. Kofi stopped, breathing in the sight of the woman he had tried to discard, and felt the full weight of his failure. "Amma," he began, voice trembling. I was blind. I chose pride over loyalty. I betrayed what was most precious." She paused, setting down the measuring board, her gaze unwavering. "Kofi," she said softly, "words cannot undo what has been done. Respect and trust cannot be demanded. They must be earned." Overcome by shame, Kofi fell to his knees. The dirt beneath him felt like the only place he truly belonged, a humbling reminder of his roots and the wisdom he had scorned. "I beg forgiveness," he said, voice breaking. "I see now that wealth without character is nothing. I am ready to learn, to honor, to rebuild." Amma said nothing, but the silence itself spoke volumes. Her calm patience taught him that strength was not measured by mansions or contracts, but by steadfastness, integrity, and the ability to rise above bitterness. The wind rustled through nearby trees, carrying the sound of distant drums from a village ceremony. It was as if the ancestors themselves were observing, weighing deeds and intent. Kofi felt the weight of justice, of consequence, of destiny itself. Pride had fallen, loyalty had endured, and the universe, like the elders who had watched silently for decades, demanded balance. He lifted his head slowly, trembling with hope and fear. Would forgiveness blossom like a rain-kissed flower? Could the woman who had built him from nothing find it in her heart to restore what had been broken? He waited, every heartbeat echoing the rhythm of the ancestors, knowing that the answer would shape the rest of his life. Outside, the sun broke through clouds, casting streaks of golden light on the village. It was a subtle promise that even after the darkest storms, patience, humility, and loyalty can bring a new dawn. Kofi knelt on the dusty path outside Amma's modest home, the weight of shame pressing on his shoulders like the hot sun above. His hands trembled as he spoke, voice breaking with desperation. "Amma, I was blind. I threw away the most precious part of my life. Please, forgive me." Amma stood quietly, her eyes calm yet unyielding. She did not step forward, she did not speak immediately. The silence stretched, heavy with meaning. Every heartbeat was a lesson. "Kofi," she said finally, her voice steady, "silence teaches what words cannot. You must understand the cost of betrayal before forgiveness can even be considered." He lowered his head, ashamed. "I will do anything, anything to make it right." She shook her head slowly. "Love is not a cloth to wear and discard. It is not a shield to hide your ego. Love must be honored, nurtured, and respected. Words alone cannot restore what was broken." Kofi swallowed, realizing that his apologies were fragile as dry clay. "Tell me, what must I do?" Amma's gaze was firm, carrying the weight of tradition and the quiet power of patience. "Show me through action. Rebuild not just your wealth, but your character. Humility must walk beside ambition. Respect must guide your every step." He nodded, determination stirring within him. "I will prove it. Not just to you. To myself, to the village, to the ancestors." She allowed a small, measured smile. "The first step toward trust is a journey, not a gift. You will walk it patiently, Kofi. Only then will reconciliation begin." Kofi left the village that day with a heavy but enlightened heart. The mansion he had once claimed as a crown of pride now felt like a cage of arrogance. He sold it, exchanging towering walls and polished floors for the simple comfort of a small, sunlit house back in the heart of the village. With each box he carried, pride fell further behind, replaced by humility. Returning to his roots, he sought the council of elders, sitting beneath the shade of ancient baobabs and listening to stories that reminded him of the balance between ambition and honor. The village that once watched him with skeptical eyes now observed him with quiet curiosity, sensing the change in his heart. Standing before the elders, Kofi bowed deeply. "I have sinned against my wife, against tradition, and against the values that built me," he admitted, voice trembling but sincere. "Amma's loyalty was my foundation, and I abandoned it. I ask for the village's forgiveness and guidance as I strive to restore what I have broken." Slowly, he reopened his business, but differently this time. Contracts were honored, employees treated fairly, and ambition walked hand in hand with integrity. Each success was built on respect and diligence rather than shortcuts and empty showmanship. Amma joined him, not as a silent follower but as a partner. Together, they helped women start small businesses, teaching them skills, lending support, and spreading the wisdom of patience and perseverance. Their partnership became a living lesson for the village, that true success is measured not by gold or titles but by loyalty, respect, and community. Even as Kofi pursued modern ambitions, he learned the delicate balance between progress and tradition. He bowed before the elders, offered guidance to the young, and honored the ancestors with gratitude. Wealth alone could not replace the values he had once ignored. Only through humility, action, and shared purpose could he rebuild his life, his marriage, and his standing in the village. At night, under the quiet glow of lanterns and the watchful stars, Kofi and Amma would sit together, hands intertwined, reflecting on the journey from pride to humility. The village watched, and the elders whispered, "A tree that remembers its roots survives any storm." And for the first time, Kofi understood the truth behind their words. Months passed, and the village watched closely as Kofi's life slowly returned to balance. His company, once teetering on ruin, began to grow steadily. Contracts were honored with honesty, employees treated with fairness, and decisions guided not by greed but by respect. Kofi's success no longer blinded him, it walked hand in hand with humility. Amma stood beside him in the office, hands folded over ledgers, eyes calm and assured. "See, Kofi," she said softly, "prosperity built on truth lasts longer than gold stacked on deceit." Kofi nodded, a humble smile tugging at his lips. "I have learned that, Amma. True fortune is not measured in money but in trust and honor." At home, their marriage healed quietly, like rain soaking dry earth. Laughter returned to the small courtyard, conversations flowing freely, and the warmth of shared purpose binding them stronger than before. Each day, they mended what pride had torn apart, proving that love, when nurtured with patience and respect, could survive even the harshest storms. The community, once quick to judge, now observed with renewed respect. Elders who had shaken their heads in disapproval nodded subtly as Kofi bowed before them in humility. Children whispered stories of the man who fell but learned to rise again with honor, and neighbors offered greetings with warmth rather than suspicion. Beneath the great baobab tree in the village square, Kofi and Amma planted a new seedling, small but vibrant. "A tree that remembers its roots survives any storm," Amma whispered, hands pressing the soil firmly around it. Kofi gazed at her, eyes full of understanding. Wealth without loyalty destroys, and pride blinds. True beauty lies not in appearance, but in character and deeds. The wind rustled through the branches, carrying the lesson across the village. Those who honor tradition, respect elders, and nurture humility will withstand fate's trials. And in that quiet, sunlit moment, life returned to harmony, anchored in wisdom, love, and the enduring strength of roots remembered.